This session features Diversity Center of Seattle. The Diversity Center of Seattle is a nonprofit human rights organization that has been dedicated to eliminating bias, bigotry, and racism in Washington since 2018. The organizational mission is to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion by driving authentic innovation for change in our workplaces and communities. Our guest speakers from the Diversity Center of Seattle will discuss the importance of recognizing injustice and increasing our awareness of inequity. We'll hear stories of resilience, and the team will talk about their lived experiences and how they strive to create and perpetuate an inclusive workplace culture. I'm honored to introduce Iannelli Craciun, founder of the Diversity Center of Seattle, Jeanine Nicole Morales, founder of Infinity Consulting PDX and co-president of the ACLU of Oregon, Chamel Simmons, music artist, activist, and entrepreneur, Barra, people and change management consultant. We anticipate a very engaging discussion. So as questions come up, please put them in the chat and we will try our best to get to as many as time allows at the end of the Diversity of Seattle's presentation. So Jean, Chamel, Alex, Jeanine, welcome to the stage, or should I say screens?
Start video. Thank you, IWD committee, and your amazing team that we've been working with for weeks now. Dolores, thank you for that lovely introduction. So appreciate your time. The committee asked me to share influences that inspired me to become a champion of equity. The early days. My father fought in 2 world wars and received a Purple Heart for his service. My mother raised 5 children above this funeral home in Cleveland, Ohio, and should have received a Medal of Honor. My parents, with their parents, started the Craciun Funeral Home, which still exists today. My family was loving kindness to people in crisis. Next screen. There it is, the Craciun Funeral Home. And yep, just like 6 feet under, we were raised in the top floors of that funeral home. 3 boys, 2 girls. I am the youngest, and my brothers still work that business today. My sister and I left, or perhaps more true to our experience, our mother literally kicked us out of Cleveland, telling us that we will have a bigger life than she has had. Both of us with master's degrees and higher education, knowing we could do anything we wanted, we chose to live right here in the great state of Washington. My dad saw me for real, his little lesbian daughter. He explained one day, I had gay friends in the military. They were my brothers, and we fought honorably together. He let me be and do all that I desired. I was the best athlete in the family, just saying. But my fondest memories were being outside, fishing, and hunting with him. There I am in the middle, the little lesbian. Honestly, that door behind me is to the embalming room. That's my brother Joe and Jim, getting ready for a trip. My mother, the youngest of Italian immigrants, experienced discrimination and trauma. Seriously, the mafia would blow up their grocery store because my grandfather would not pay them for protection. She was called WAP and Diego and Dago and all these horrible names, and that created a fear and unsafe feeling that she carried with her whole life. She was always concerned, as we mothers are, for our children. How will they be treated? She worried about her lesbian daughter. And I understand it. I have a 16-year-old daughter, Anna Sophia, and I have 18-year-old Anthony. And yes, I believe I am an activist today because of and for them. The formative years, a little bit more about my story. So I came out first year in college, just like that play going on right now, Fun Home here in Seattle, about the lesbian raised in a funeral home. That was me. Went to the University of Cincinnati, played varsity for the Bearcats. Any UC out there? It was 1972, and Title IX of the Federal Education Amendments had come out. And it stated anyone with a sports team for men must have comparable for women. What do you think? There was no enforcement of Title IX. And I don't know how it happened, but I ended up on the athletic committee as the only woman, a little athlete. Well, I struggled for 4 years to get parity for scholarships. Well, it actually happened the year after I left. So, with all of us watching March Madness right now, let's look at this whole basketball thing as success, right? I went back to UC a couple times, got my NCAA varsity letter. The team today is amazing from all over the world. So sports has arrived in certain stages. But for me, after college, I was all stirred up. I took a gap year and I wanted to get involved in women's culture. I went to women's music festivals. Remember those consciousness raising groups? Listened to Holly Near, that human rights activist, teacher, and songwriter. And Sweet Honey in the Rock. Sweet Honey in the Rock is an all African American female vocal group that still performs today. Look them up. They're amazing. Sweet Honey in the Rock. And I heard speeches of the likes of, next slide. That's me with Glorious Dynam. Such an exciting time. So wonderful. So much fun. But then I had to get back to my career and had to make a life. I was creating my own destiny. I actually got into Cleveland Marshall Law School. But after about a month, I walked across the street into Cleveland State University's sociology department and met my life's mentor. There she is on the right of the screen, Dr. Mary Joyce Green. She had come to CSU in 1966 and was the first female sociology professor for CSU with a focus on sociology and poverty. She inspired change for all women of backgrounds, races, and class, and in fact created a safe space for us all on our academic journey. I found my place. She let me grow and change and innovate, and I thrived. In 1978, she had founded the Women's Comprehensive Center, and I was its first graduate assistant. It is now called CSU Women's and Gender Studies Program. That same program that down in Florida, way down there, they're trying to cut out of all the universities in Florida. Okay, I digress. March is Women's History Month, and today is International Women's Day. Please join me to honor and to celebrate this woman pioneer, Mary Joyce Green. Look at that picture. Do you notice the other change maker in that photo on yet a different stage? That is Congresswoman Bella Abzug. I invited her to CSU many times to speak. What an inspiration. And now I'm friends with her daughter, Liz Abzug, who's an activist and educator in New York. Bella taught me so much about politics. So they were my acculturation as a feminist. Fast forward, I had lived and been an activist in Anchorage, Alaska. for 30 years. Don't go in the summer. Supposed to be 6 weeks, never left. I had those 2 kids. I ran a successful global research company. I actually had a contract in 1994 to 96 with USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, in Russia, right? You can see it from my porch in Alaska. Okay, again, I digress. I was the lead trainer for Russian sociologists to learn about qualitative research. It was a social conversion project, and it was 1995. And so one day, we've been working for several weeks, and I come down to work. No work, they say. I'm like, no work? What's going on? I mean, everything happened that could happen. You know, normal project, you have a A, B, C plan. In Russia, you needed up to Z planning. They said, oh, it's International Women's Day. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This place treats women horribly. Elders, women were at the train station selling bread because Putin had taken their pensions. Every day, I'll tell you, working that project for the government, I said, God bless America, under my breath. It was unbelievable, honestly. Fast forward again. I am in Cleveland for Thanksgiving, and it is November 22nd, 2014. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old boy, is killed by police in Cleveland at my playground. He was throwing snowballs and playing with a plastic toy pellet gun. Remember me and my brothers with the guns? We did that in our backyard. Tamir did not have a backyard, so he was at our playground. They shot him dead within 2 minutes after arriving. Dispatcher failed to send and state the caution note. He was a child with a toy, which had been reported. Cleveland and the banter in my old neighborhood, the hateful comments, the lies, the exaggerated theories. Honestly, folks, it changed me forever. Tamir Rice, please say his name. I had moved to Seattle, Washington, from racist, homophobic Ohio to beautiful yet misogynistic, racist, and very red Alaska. Ohio today is dealing with toxic train wreck crisis. Unknown to many, Alaska actually fought and won human and civil rights way before the United States Civil Rights Act of 1964. It passed an anti-discrimination law in 1945, almost a pure 20 years before. And thanks to Elizabeth Peretrovich and her family. Like today, this holiday we're celebrating all over the world. In Alaska, in February, we celebrate Elizabeth Peretrovich Day. Alaska Native Indigenous peoples, when referring to them, prefer to use names they use in their own language, such as Yupik and Inupiat. Please never say Eskimo, as that is a colonial name imposed by non-Indigenous people. I was quite the activist in Alaska and very much part of the LGBTQIA plus 2S, two-spirit, while I lived there for 30 years. But it was always 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. My last fight in Alaska was won in a vote, but lost to a veto by Mayor Dan Sullivan. It was basically what Harvey Milk had gotten for San Francisco in 1970. You cannot be fired, you cannot lose your home just because you're gay. That was the fight that time in Alaska. I'll tell you, I did sit with that mayor and tell him in a very personal conversation as I left that city, no self-respecting gay person can live here and thrive. I will be leaving with my young family. And it was 2011. Seattle, University Center of Seattle. I love Seattle, and I am moved daily by its intentionality, by its desire, as our Mayor Harrell just noted in the State of the City's address. We must embrace the boldness and innovation that our city is renowned for and turn policy into progress as we continue to build a healthy and thriving One Seattle together in 2023. Honestly, we must embrace boldness. It is an amazing city that we have with our mayor directing us in this path. The country is watching us. Literally, the top authors are here. IaMcHaMel, so you want to talk about race, Dr. Robin DiAngelo, white fragility, nice racism, everything is here. So it is on us. We know this will take all of us. And it is not an easy task to unravel social conditioning. But I am taking my chances with the people here in Seattle. Because I believe you can see many struggles, and I hear your desire in my work every day at the Diversity Center to understand these truths and to see each other. And so I will begin at the very basic of our shared experience and with my colleagues here today to take you through the next step in your education to move fully as women and anti-racist action that will make each one of you change makers for our city, as that is what we are called upon to do now. To the women here, when was the first time you realized that you had a gender? And that if that gender was assigned at birth, female, that you were seen as less valuable? Or realize when your family system or early school experience that just because of your gender, you had less challenges or were expected to be a certain way and required to play roles that were revered or always in service to others. For me, as a Catholic Italian woman, it was sinner, saint, or submissive wife. Well, that left me out. And for all of us women, a message that you had no right to self-actualize, well, I pushed back on that, as you can see. And now, everyone, let's think about, when was the first time you realized you had a race? Let's really think about that for a second. When was that actually? And again, for me and most white women, it came later in life. But that is not the same for women of color, and that's why we have to talk about intersectional understanding of gender, as it is critical, and we must acknowledge that there is no shared women's experience in that. It's such a gift of knowledge, and it is not the job of people of color to fix us. And it is not their job even to sit with us. It is our job to do the work of our own awareness in the context of our lived experiences. What is intersectionality? It's a framework of understanding social identities, such as gender, race, ethnicity, social class, religion, sexual orientation, ability, and gender identity, overlapping with one another and with systems primarily of power that oppress and advantage people in the workplace and the broader community. These are the daily microaggressions and implicit bias that discriminate and disadvantage Black and brown Indigenous peoples in our white-dominated American society. And now the backlash, as some learn that statistically speaking, there are more of color in America now than white. That's the backlash, people. Be ready, watch it. The statistics are out. Students of color are now the majority of Washington public schools. Washington and Seattle's population is roughly 2/3 white, but between 2009 and 2022, the percentage of kids identifying as a race other than white increased by nearly 50%. People, the change is here, and we can resist futilely or embrace it and celebrate it. Each one of us being called upon to see with new eyes and hearts a world as Ida B. Wells did. Born into slavery and who became a journalist and impassioned speaker, which helped turn the tide against the atrocity of lynching. In these words, 130 years ago, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth on them. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth on them. It's not our fault that we have been socialized in this way, but it is our job to want to learn, listen, and move our community and workplace forward. Just like the mayor said, together, one Seattle. Let's embrace the change now. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak some of my words. I have invited 3 of my colleagues, amazing humans that I get to work with every day. And I'd like to first call up Jeanine, Nicole, Morales.
Ashe, Jean, thank you. I'm going to talk about breaking of the glass ceiling. And for many of us women of color, we tend to talk about breaking the ceiling, but oftentimes our road to that ceiling is kind of blocked by a piece of concrete. And so I always say breaking the concrete ceiling.
What you just said, great job.
It was not too long ago when I was a young girl, filtered through so many systems and life challenges such as foster care, adoption, the repeated cycle of teen pregnancy that branded me with the assumed outcome of being part of the have-nots. I've always, in the midst of that, had a dream to be a successful woman who would one day have an office and a briefcase. I just knew I was made to be a boss. However, it was only a dream because far too often I was told that if I wanted a family, I could not have it all. If I wanted to be a successful businesswoman, I would give up my ability to have love in my life, children, and even a social life. And the list would continue to grow of all the things that I wouldn't have if I wanted to be a successful businesswoman. I was often told that I had the same chance of being a powerful Black woman in business as little boys who would dream to go pro. So I let my dream live in my head and I would move on with my day, months, and years. Not too surprising, at 19, I became a mother, a wife, and I worked just to make ends meet. I was never angry, and the fire from my dream continued to burn within me. I just didn't know how to get on that path. Not the path for me would mean that I would have to actually break this concrete ceiling. Not just the glass ceiling that others who had the same assigned gender would face, but the concrete ceiling that people who looked like me were often handed. It took almost a decade before I would be inspired and supported by women to start my life over after a divorce and moving back home from across the country. Each woman held a part of me that eventually led me down the path of post-secondary education and into a new career. It was women who looked like me, cheering me on, being a shoulder to me and picking up the mom duties I had to miss in order to get through school and my first year of employment. I was a decade behind in my career in my head. A 30-something-year-old just graduating from college with a child in middle school. It was at this point I made a promise to myself. I was definitely going to beat the odds. I had the tenacity, I had the strength, I had the will, and I will make it to executive leadership by any means necessary. I told my boss I'd be there in 5 years. I was met with many barriers once I began to apply for many of the leadership positions available. I was either not experienced enough, I didn't know all these other intricate positions well enough to manage them or a team. I had a child in school, and as a single parent, could I truly be dedicated to the work? I often came across many HR questions and inappropriate asks that would let me know they were trying to find a way to let me down really nicely. I would always know when my interview was done based off those questions. I was a year into my I was a year I was in year 3 into my career when my director had a discussion with me about moving into leadership. As many of us women of color, we often spend a lot of our times helping our white managers and white leaders do their jobs, assist their work so that they can continue to look good because one, we want to learn it, but also because we want them to look good as well and show them that we can do the job and become part of leadership. Um, she would lean on me in many of my ideas, and one day she began to let me shadow her in many of her leadership meetings, where she often gave me credit for the work she would submit. Her selfless acts opened my eyes to the new world of networking and possible opportunities. She was the one person who suggested to me directly that I should apply for this very first executive leadership role that she came across. Almost a month passed before I was invited to interview to be a deputy director of a local repro organization. I was so nervous and sure that I was definitely unqualified based on the very intimidating 3-page job description. I was amazed that I had been offered the role. I'd been offered a role as an executive leader of the organization. I had finally manifested my dream. The little girl in her room dreaming of being important in an office with a briefcase has finally arrived. Not only was it a woman of color and leadership team, but we were both new to leadership and felt we could grow and learn together. It was the woman who managed me who saw the potential in my leadership and pushed me to embark on a journey I had only imagined. It wasn't long into this role where I also experienced the most hurtful and emotional draining experience of my career. I was championed as the first Black woman in leadership, only to find out that I was a veneer of diversity for this organization because it was needed, because everyone was scrambling to diversify their leadership after the death of George Floyd. I found my role was a response to the intense pressure to diversify leadership to remain on trend. I was just an accessory. It was women who built me up. It was women who shared space with me. And it was women who gave me an opportunity. But it was often very hurtful that the women who led me in the most powerful position I was given, who oppressed me and force fed me with microaggressions and eventually took away my livelihood, for calling out the discrimination and oppressive acts to the women of color within the organization, to the staff, and to the most vulnerable populations that we were committed to serve. I have since bounced back with ongoing opportunities and organizations in the Pacific Northwest, DC, California, New York, helping organizations learn to support, engage, and trust their women in leadership with the specialization of women of color in leadership. As we celebrate International Women's Day, I want to challenge you all to take a moment. Understand your power, privilege, and ask yourself, are you being an advocate? How are you bringing more women into your space? When placed or moved into leadership, are you sponsoring other women with mentorship, advocacy? Without this, you're upholding the system of the good old boys. Don't look outward for praise. Be the change from within, even when no one is looking or no one will know that you were the person who inspired this movement. I've been inspired by the words of Janelle Monáe, and I will share them with you now. I believe it is time that women truly owned their superpowers and their beauty and strength to change the world around them. You are only as beautiful as the many beautiful things you do for others without expectation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeanine, for those inspiring words of change. I loved every piece of it, every moment. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being part of my team. We're now going to bring up Chamel Simmons, an entrepreneur, music artist, activist, certified behavioral specialist who works with youth that have been impacted by systemic oppression. Chamel also has a nonprofit who focuses on homeless and partners with schools, districts to provide resources for those in need. You're up, Chamel.
All right. Before I get started, I want to show y'all something in my house. This is a wall we have. Inspirational wall. Black women throughout history who have had to fight, stand, and be the first, some cases the only, in their family, where they're from, to make a difference, to make change, to create the world in which they wanted to see, despite the adversities and whatever they were facing, they did it. And we know them for what they've done. So my name is Chamel Simmons. I go by the name of IaMcHaMel. I am an artist, activist, and entrepreneur. I am pro-woman and a firm believer in our superpowers to carry the world on our shoulders while providing the solutions for the future. I admire our ability to make the impossible possible and look fabulous in the process. We are brilliant. We are beautiful. We are resilient, and we are strong. We don't make excuses. We make a way. We take the experiences of life and teach others how to thrive in the midst of chaos by remembering the strength of our ancestors that persevered through so we can have the luxuries and the quality of life that we take for granted today. We wear our scars boldly and proudly because each of them tell a story about our journey of where we were, what we went through, and how we made it out. We are able to take the lessons from our most sacred and vulnerable times and use them to uplift and inspire others who are facing difficulties. We laugh in disbelief at the audacities of those who try to limit us. We cry in silence, afraid of our tears may be signs of weakness or temporary defeat. We are taught to be gentle, kind, and accommodating, as if our worth is only of value when we are in service to our counterparts who feel inferior in our presence. We are living in a day and age where self-love, self-acceptance is obsolete. We are told the uniqueness we are created with is somehow unacceptable in our society. We are constantly being told to look like this, just like that. Carry yourself like them, and you should do what they're doing over there. We are often put in positions to choose between our livelihood and our values. We must understand that our voice and our platform is the most important thing that we possess. Our voice is a tool and an instrument to speak up on the things we value and want to see for ourselves, our families, and the future. Our voice is powerful. It will open doors and provide change and empower others to think, act, and be the change in the world that they want to see. Maya Angelou said, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise." Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history, I rise. Up from the past that rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. For those of you who are familiar with Maya Angelou's story, you know what she experienced and what she went through and how she didn't speak for 5 years. She didn't use her voice for 5 years because her speaking up caused harm to somebody who caused harm to her. And she couldn't bear the thought of knowing that she was responsible for what happened to that person, even though that person had violated her. So that goes to show the power of our voice, right? The power in our voice. You hear me? The power in our voice is everything. It cannot be silenced. It cannot be taken. It cannot be muted unless we allow it. We need to not allow it. We speak and we stand on what we speak. We stand on what we believe. I wrote a piece for this special occasion, and I call it "We Celebrate You." We celebrate you. You who have been broken barriers and stood in the gaps and fought for space in the world that told you you didn't exist. We celebrate you. You who have had to go inward to discover the possibilities and potential you didn't know you possessed until you were forced to find it. We celebrate you. You who have had to juggle life on life terms while expected to still show up and smile as though everything is okay. We celebrate you. You who are the first of your families to think outside the cultural boundaries and expectations that were placed upon you to fulfill out of tradition and obligation. We celebrate you. You who charted your own path, created your own lane, and never allowed the adversities and uncertainties to stop you from forward progression. We celebrate you. You who have had to leave your place of origin, family, and everything you know and love to create a life of freedom, peace, and happiness. We celebrate you. You who find the balance in being a provider, a support system, and a working phenomenon. We celebrate you. I challenge you all to think about the power you hold and the ways that you can use your power to help others become their highest self. I challenge you all to use your platform to positively impact your community, the people of the community, and folks who may not have had access to some of the opportunities and resources that you have now acquired. I challenge you all to think about a way you want to see the world operate and do something every day that contributes to that outcome. I challenge you all every day to look in the mirror and tell yourself, I am enough. I am worthy. I am love. I am prosperous. I am peace. I challenge you all to show up every day in every space as your authentic selves. I challenge you all to express yourself, your culture, and the things that bring you value. I challenge you all to be better, do better, and help the world be a better place. Thank y'all for the opportunity.
Oh my God, Chamel, you're killing me, babe. Just like, whew, I know. Alex Barra has to come up now after that. You got this, Alex. She's a people and change management consultant who has 10 years experience in human resources and people consulting. They specialize in HR modernization, digital transformation, and change management. A native New Yorker, Alex brings a unique blend of intersectionality as a non-binary person and has experienced the working world as female and other. Take it, Alex.
So much, Jean, and Seattle, so happy to be with you today. I don't know how I'm gonna come after Chamel. That was amazing. But I think there are a couple of things that I want you to take away from my talk. And the first one that I want you to think about is we have to respect our differences as humans. We all come from different places, different experiences, and we have to honor each other. And number two is we all can change. We can all do better. So the first thing that I want to, go into is, we're here to celebrate women, our mothers, our sisters, our grandmothers, our aunts, our wives. But we're so much more than just women. Women is one part of the identity. And there's other intersectionalities that really make us unique and are those superpowers that Chamel and Jeanine are talking about. So some things that stand out to me, gender, race, for this crew, tribal affiliation, there's a lot of pride in that. And so let's own that and let's move through that. And I'll give a little bit about my story as well. Another thing to think about is religion, disability, visible or invisible, physical appearance, ethnicity. I think something that really drew me to Jean was that I always say that Jean is me in the future. I am a little lesbian, New York Italian, with very conservative parents that kind of don't understand me. And Jean was one of the first people who was, an adult or like a parental figure to see me. And that is so critical. We have to see each other at work. We're all carrying these invisible suitcases with us that you might not be able to see. And throughout my experience in consulting and HR, as leaders, no matter if you're an individual contributor or an actual leader, we all have to come together and know how to acknowledge people for who they are and the gifts that they bring to the table. So I kind of want to tell you about my experience and kind of the process of me coming to talk at International Women's Day. So when Jean asked me to, I was a little nervous because I was like, okay, what am I going to contribute to International Women's Day? I'm non-binary, and so I go by they them pronouns. And as a kid, I was that tomboy. It's just a phase. She'll grow out of it. But as I got older, I realized that this isn't a phase. Like, I just don't really see myself either way, female, male. I really am other. And having that realization is really scary. To think about your identity that you've had your whole entire life just be uprooted, huge change, and it takes time. So I think it's more than just pronouns that everyone is talking about. It's really seeing somebody for who they are, and that we're all human at the end of the day. And so when I think about my own experience, I worked on the manufacturing floor for a really long time as a labor representative. And, being seen as female is it was an experience in itself. I would walk down the assembly line and I would be hooting, they would be hooting and hollering, and saying all sorts of things. And that's super real. Granted, I didn't look like this back then. I had long hair. I was definitely trying to not be seen as other. And what I realized over time is that, like, it's okay. It's okay to be other. It's just so important to make other people understand other. And I think that uncertainty is really scary for some people. And that's why, City of Seattle, we must just like embrace everyone. And if you don't understand it, that is okay. If you mess up, that is okay. I mess up all the time when it comes to pronouns and other non-binary people. I slip up and I own it. So own that you are going to make mistakes. Things are messy. We're not perfect, but we have to try. We have to try. So I also think that there's another part of identity that's really interesting these day and age, and it's in the forefront of my mind because it's near and dear to my heart, right? When I think about disabilities, visible and invisible, that can be a whole change to the way that you perceive yourself as well. I was diagnosed with ADHD, something that I didn't know that I had. I masked in the world really, really well for a while. But during the pandemic, the curtain was kind of pulled back. And that came with its own things that I kind of thought through. I was like, okay, now, like, how does this affect my life? Like, how I perceive myself, how I walk in the world. And it's so important that we create places where people can use these superpowers, to influence, right? I think I can shift from things really easily from one place to the other. And that's okay. But we got to just like uplift people and make people not feel like other. I think that is what I want you to walk away with, because I don't, when we all peel back all of our layers, we're all other. We're not the same. We can learn from each other. And, I think when I think about my career in HR, it's super interesting to see it evolve, like from, personnel to all of the different pieces that make up HR today. One being diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also like my field of change management. So what I want to ask you all, and I want to challenge you all, is we're all here today, right? So you're here for a reason. You're here for Women's Day, but our talk is about inspiring change. So you've heard a lot of wonderful things from Jeanine, Chamel, Jean. What do you actually want to change? Like, why did you come today? I want you to just reflect and sit in that, because change is hard. I'll be the first to tell you, like, since I was, oh my gosh, I moved in the 2nd grade and I cried for months. And personal change is hard. And I'll be the first to admit it takes time. But I think, like, to round it up, like, now that you've heard all of these different perspectives, like, what do you want to change? What are you going to move through the world with after this session? And so I want to just hit on that. I give everyone credit, right? We're all here. So we're aware. We're aware that we need to do something different. We have the desire that we want to do something different. But what I find is, like, the real sticking point for business and personal change is knowledge. How do I do it? How do I change? Like, what do I need to do? And so I want to offer some advice from a change manager of how to change, right? Like, and the first thing that I can tell you is you have to act. Like, when I think about Jean, I always say that Jean was Jean so Alex could be Alex today, right? Like, if you look at the whole trajectory of Jean's life and what has been fought for, I only exist as a human in this world because of Jean and people like Jean, the other bucket. So you have to act, you have to get out there, be curious. Curiosity is so important. If you don't understand, if pronouns don't make sense to you and you have a non-binary coworker, or you know somebody and you really just want to understand, open up those lines of communication. one quote that I really love from Ram Dass that I think is so critical about the human condition is we're all walking each other home at the end of the day, right? We're all on this journey of life and it's super short, but we might as well work together to make a better reality, right? And so what I would really challenge you to think about is, what are some of the beliefs that I have that are limiting me, right? What do I reframe with to actually change my thoughts, to be able to act, and also like get support from others and continue to learn and absorb. I would recommend like as much as you can, use your curiosity to read books, watch and make space for documentaries and things that you wouldn't normally know. Because that's how you're going to get a full picture and you're going to learn about other people's shared experiences. I also think another thing about change is like having the ability, like, am I really able to do this? And thinking about like, what are those barriers that are really stopping me from either changing my mindset, changing like how I feel about, yourself as a human, because you might be going through different transitions of life. It's not a, coming out thing. We're learning stuff about ourselves and what we like and what we don't like every day. And being able to integrate that together is super, super, super important. And so, what I want to leave you with this. I talked a lot today, but I really want to encourage and round out this dynamic team with we have to act in order to change. Like we've heard a lot of different perspectives, and I want you to think about the golden nugget that you've taken away from all of us talking and figuring out what am I going to do differently today, tomorrow? How am I going to keep this conversation going? How am I going to make this important? That is how you change. And so I want to thank you all, Seattle, because I'm really empowered by being here and having this platform of being other and talking on International Women's Day, which was a really big thing for me because I didn't feel like I belong. But at the end of the day, we all belong. No matter if you are what your race is, your sexuality, your gender identity, your tribal affiliation, right? You deserve a seat at that table no matter what. And so, yes, today is about women, but it's really about all of us and being able to embrace those pieces of ourselves that we might be feeling shame about or being held back by. But I'll say it again, in order to change, we have to be inspired to act. So I want to say thank you all, and I'll shift it over back to Jean.
Can you see this team? Are you kidding me? Each one, such a gift of their knowledge and perspective, and the future, right? The youth. Love you three so much. We do have a few moments for question.
So we do have a question. And I guess I pose it to all of you. How do you learn to speak up and use your voice when it seems like others want you to stay quiet?
Go, Chamel. You're like, nah.
Listen, people hate you because they ain't you. They want you to be quiet because you're going to expose things and you're going to ruffle feathers. And you got to think, people are afraid of their livelihoods being shaken up. They're afraid of their comfortability being shaken up. They're afraid of exposure. They're afraid of the truth revealing itself. And it's like, nah, we can't continue to allow people to operate and do and be and things to go on as they once were, because they were never meant for any empowerment or improvement of besides the men that were in the room creating it. Think about it, like all the laws, constitution, the principles, foundations, everything was built with these ideals that these men had in these rooms. We weren't allowed in there. We weren't in there. We weren't a part of that. Us being Black people, we weren't even considered people to even have an opinion to speak on, let alone, remember, women were supposed to be in the kitchen at home with the kids. Like, we cannot continue to allow things to go on as they once were. Like, if we want change, we have to speak on that change. We have to do what we can to make that change. And we can't allow anybody to silence us, threaten us with anything. Like, There's a million ways to make $1 million. Pick one. You feel me? There's a million jobs out here. Like I'm talking from bosses, from corporations to spouses to family. Like you will no longer be able to take my voice. This is all I can control. You feel me? You cannot have it. You cannot give your power away. You just have to stand on it.
Thanks, Chamel. Anybody else? Jeanine, you got it.
I always say celebrate the women who are on the front lines. Like, no matter what level you are in at work, celebrate anyone that's across the board. In the cubicle next to you, the person who comes and takes your trash out, the person at the front desk, buy them a coffee. Like, say, hey, thank you for the work that you're doing. Treat everyone as your equal and give them credit for the work that they do, no matter how small it is. Also, elevate the visibility. That's what happened to me. I had people who were in spaces and they finally brought me into those spaces, or they gave me credit without me knowing that. If you got an idea and it helped you do your job, say, hey, I was walking and I was chatting with so-and-so and we came across this conversation and we thought this was a good idea. Be inclusive in who is sharing that information. Also, build the workplace where women can thrive emotionally. Like, be that person where someone can say, like, I'm having a hard day. We put on masks when we go to work. We're always perfect. Life happens. You could wake up to tragedy and you have to go to work and perform. Understand that we can be vulnerable with each other and be an ear, not a gossiping ear, but be an ear to that person, a shoulder. Sometimes just let someone know, lean in and say, I see you. Like, I see you. I hear you. And then also invest in community programs that's beyond your job. Find groups. I'm a part of a birth justice group that a group of birth workers came together for the last 2 years. And it was just a place for us to talk about being parents, birthing people who are actual birth workers, just talking and having a space, because we are in a very white space. And it's hard for people of color to be in those spaces and have those careers and not feel like you have community. And so we created a community where we were just chatting, to the point where we ended up getting grants where we can give each other self-care funds. So it's create the space. If it's not there, if you build it, they will come. It's that simple. Just invest in the community that you want and create your tribe.
Thank you so much for bringing all that up, Chamel and Jeanine. It reminds me of my work with King County, Race as a Health Crisis. I mean, we are centering Black and Indigenous people and doing grants for $25 million. This week it's coming out. And we have to think in terms of, look at the statistics. I'm a researcher. The lowest indicators are all challenged right now. That is where we need to put our money, our focus. Race as a health crisis, absolutely. It is on us right now as women, as people of Seattle, to look together for the human response to the crisis and to be the solution. I ask you to rise up. I ask you to speak up. And I ask you to be the change that everybody knows Seattle can be. Let's do it together, like this group.